right, y'all, welcome back. Second to last Friday of your eighth grade year, exactly as we planned it. And so today we're going to look at the some of the main points of Jesus' early life, but what we're really going to focus on today is actually Mary. And you might say, well, Mr. Forrest, what does this Mary person have to do with Jesus? Okay, so obviously, hopefully you know that I'm kidding. This is one of the things that I'd say beguiles, confuses Protestants and Catholics the most, or you could say the relationship between them, right? So if you have friends that are Baptist or Methodist or evangelicals, pretty much you'll agree on everything with regards to the stuff we've already talked about, with all the Old Testament stuff with very few exceptions, all the Gospel stuff with very few exceptions. In fact, the St. Paul stuff, most of our Protestant friends will probably even emphasize that even more. When it gets to Mary, there's some interesting confusion because Catholics tend to place Mary very, 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 very highly in their theological, understandings and lectures. And Protestants do not reject Mary as important, but they tend to be a little suspicious of Catholics getting close to worshiping Mary. So right off the bat, we want to answer that question. Catholics do not worship Mary. We venerate Mary. We give her a lot of respect. We think she's the queen of the saints, like the second most important person that's ever lived after Jesus. But we don't worship her as God. But I hope by the end of today you'll notice why it is that Catholics place such an emphasis on Mary and how important she is in the life of Jesus. Again, we said you couldn't have Christianity without the Incarnation. Well, you couldn't have had the Incarnation without Mary. And hopefully today you'll see why she's so important. So if you've heard of the word Advent, the season of Advent, it just means coming. The impending arrival of something, right? You're on the precipice of the coming of Christ. And so the season of Advent is preparing for Christ, but the advent of Christ in this context is Mary, her preparation, you could say, to give birth to Christ. And so it begins, like we said the other day, at the Annunciation, Gabriel announcing to Mary that she, in the plans of God, will conceive and bear a son, and she name him Jesus. And the thing about this moment, right, that often gets overlooked, from the outside of Christianity, not usually from the inside of Christianity, but from the outside, is that God allows Mary to have a choice in the matter. Yes, the angel Gabriel comes to her with this plan, but Mary could have said no, and she doesn't. She says, "Let it be done unto me according to thy word." She gives her fiat, her yes. And that choice to participate in the life that God has prepared for her is the prime example of what all of us are called to do. That when God comes to us, probably not from a visit from an angel, but when God comes to us and says, I've got this plan for you, your vocation, right? We are intended to answer the same way that Mary did, saying, "Yes, let it be done unto me according to thy word." Also notice thy word, right? So once again, we see this reference to the word of God. And so when she says yes at that very moment, right, that's the moment of incarnation. And Mary then will become, or is, the mother of Jesus Christ. Now, here's the important part. She's not just the mother of the human side of Jesus. And this is a big debate in the early church. Was Mary the mother of just the human parts of Jesus, and then God added in the God parts? It's basically, we decide, but it's said that no, Mary is the God bearer, the Theotokos, that she is the mother of Jesus Christ. And that means that she is the mother of God himself, which is crazy, right? If you think about it, like God who has existed for all time and all eternity, the Alpha, the Omega, who created the heavens and the earth. Mary, this relatively insignificant unknown person, is the mother of God. Now, there's a lot of things that are more complicated than that answer, but basically we're saying that Pope Benedict called it the scandal of the incarnation. That to conceive of God becoming man and taking on flesh and allowing himself to be born the way that humans are is a crazy thought. We're used to it because we've heard it so often. But when we say that Mary is the mother of God, we're talking about this specific moment in history. This really did happen, right? And that's, again, it gets back to what we're saying about the gospel writers. They are writing, guys, God became man. This is crazy. You guys need to know about this stuff now. And so Mary, as the mother of God, is then, you think about how you respect your own mom. Think about how you should respect the mom of God, right? And of course, this happens, right, without, it happens by a miracle, right? And so we know that Mary remained a virgin before, during, after the birth of Jesus. And so we call her the Blessed Virgin Mary. And that line, that we say in the Hail Mary, but it comes from the Gospels, from Angel Gabriel, Hail Mary, full of grace. Uh, the theological interpretation of that line is that Mary is full of grace. So if you're full of grace, she is then absent of any non-grace, any non-sin. And so Mary also remains sinless. She never sins. It's important to note, though, a distinction. It's not that Mary couldn't have sinned. She could have, but she never did. And part of that is that she's freed from original sin, and so she doesn't have that concupiscence that we talked about, that inclination towards sin. Now, that was a special grace given to Mary, that she was free of sin, right? So you and I were born with original sin. Mary was not. And that's called the Immaculate Conception. A lot of people think the Immaculate Conception is about Jesus. The Immaculate Conception is actually about Mary being conceived without sin. This is usually the part in the lecture where people have a lot of questions about how is it possible that she never sinned. If you think about like a test, let's say your entire Jesuit career, you never miss a question. It's possible in every single question, every single test, that you miss at least one, but you just never do. Some of you guys are actually close to that in this class, where you almost have never missed a single question. So in the choice between A and B, and let's say A is the right choice and B is the wrong choice, Mary always chose correctly. God didn't override her free will. She always chose the right thing to do. And that's another reason why we give Mary such veneration, because she's a prime example of what it means to be human. Again, following the will of God, and then always choosing to do his will rather than her will. Or say, always serving God rather than serving her own personal self-interest, right? And this is a great image of Mary that was painted by a woman in Mobile, Alabama. So local, sort of local painter there. Okay, last thing for today. The nativity, the birth of Christ, right? It happens kind of in weird circumstances. And, if you're going to make up a religion, right? If you're like, I'm going to make up a religion to kind of deceive and trick people, you're probably not going to invent the Christ story. Like, you're probably not going to go, I've got an idea. How about we pick an unknown woman from an unknown town with no royal connections, no power, no armies, and we're going to have her give birth to a son in a manger, in a no-name town, right? You're probably not going to come up with that story. Now, we know it as familiar because we've heard it so many times. But one of the reasons why this story also rings true is how, I won't say normal it is, that they aren't kings and queens already. They're not this big royal family with a huge army to overthrow their oppressive government. They are a small family, a poor family from an unknown place. And they travel to Bethlehem for a census, and they can't find any place, right? You know the story. No place, no room at the inn. And Jesus is born in a manger, which, again, is basically the place where the animals eat, in the barn area, right? And the first people that come and visit Jesus are not kings and queens and royal people. It's not the gods and angels and things. Well, the angels all knew about it, and you could say that they were there, but it's shepherds. It's these poor shepherds out in the fields that they come to visit Jesus. Now, there's a link there, right? A link between the old and the new. That David was originally a shepherd. Jesus is referred to as the good shepherd. There's the line where Jesus talks about going after his lost sheep. There's a lot of imagery that is going on there, but the significance is that God came into this world as a poor, humble, like lowly born human being, taking on all of our weaknesses as a human, our physical limitations, our emotions, every part of what we are, he took on in order to bring it to what it should be. And that'll be the topic for tomorrow and a little bit later. For now, though, one last thing, about the wise men that travel from afar. They don't get there right at this moment. At least, if you actually think about how long their trip would have taken. They probably would not actually be in the nativity scene, but that's okay. The gifts that they bring, though, gold, frankincense, and myrrh, all refer to Christ's identity, right? That gold is a gift of a king. Frankincense, I want to say, is refers to the royal priesthood, right? And then myrrh, maybe I got that wrong, but the idea being um, that they recognize that this little baby born in a manger is someone special. That this little baby born in a manger is what they've been searching for, what they've been looking for. And the evidence of that is that they don't go back to Herod. We'll talk about him tomorrow too. But they don't go back to Herod and tell him where Jesus is, because Herod is worried that there's some king, this rumor of a king that's going to overthrow his power. And that they recognize that Christ is that king, right? And they don't go inform Herod reveals, again, something about Christ's identity, but it also reveals something about their identity, the three wise men. That the true wisdom there is recognizing Jesus as king. Okay, so that's enough for today. Over the weekend, just make sure you answer the end questions. Next week is a little bit weird. We're going to do one day of these notes and then two kind of hurried days of the, say, like chapter 18, unit 18 notes. And then we have a test on Thursday. And then Friday is kind of a wrap up day where we'll just, not a wrap day. No, Peter, it's not a wrap day, but a wrap up day, just some final comments. And that's it, guys. There's no exams this year. So second to last Friday, and I will see you next week for our last week together. All right, take it easy.